Rumor has it that the wealthy young master finally got tired of that deaf girl. He announced his engagement to Vivian at a press conference. I took off my hearing aid and looked at him from afar across the crowd. Then, without hesitation, I turned around and left. In front of everyone, the usually cool and composed young master went crazy. It's the 7th day since Evan and I broke up. The same day, news of him and Vivian getting married spread all over the internet. Evan splurged on 200,000 albums for Vivian, who isn't even a professional musician, causing a massive stir in the music world. Suddenly, the topic of a wealthy young master spending big money for love just to win a smile from a beauty was all over the streets. Soon, the media scrambled to publish images of the well-matched couple. It seemed like, in everyone's eyes, they were destined to be together. I picked up my phone, and the messages from Evan were still from 2 days ago. I'm getting engaged to Vivian. Tina, it's not like I can't live without you. What you won't accept, others are clamoring for. My heart ached with a dense, sharp pain as I clutched my chest. In the corner of my eye, a few women walked in, laughing and chatting. Evan finally opened his eyes. You know, I never understood why he dated a deaf girl when he could have someone like Vivian. A mismatch right from the start. How could it ever work? Tina was just too naive. I think it's less about being naive and more about being scheming, fantasizing about becoming Evan's wife. She got dumped anyway. What a disgrace. I wonder how she'll get along from now on. Their mocking voices didn't stop when they saw me. Instead, they intensified, like a flood finding a breach. In everyone's eyes, my name and Evan's didn't even deserve to be mentioned together. He was a famous young master, while I was just a not-so-famous independent musician. We were born unequal. Everyone thought Evan's interest in me was just a passing whim. After having the best of food, sometimes a simple meal is needed. But Evan was unusually good to me. He actively pursued me, knowing I was passionate about music. On our first day together, he rented out all the big screens in the city to play my original songs on a loop while publicly announcing our relationship on Facebook. His handsome features were lit up, proud and undeniable, under the neon lights. The next day, my name was all over the trending lists. Because of Evan's reputation, my few songs with barely 100 listeners got tens of thousands of comments overnight. Rumors spread like wildfire. People said I had put a spell on Evan, but he pretended not to hear and introduced me to all his friends in a private booth. I watched him laugh heartily, fist bumping with elegantly dressed men and women. They talked about topics I didn't understand, about billion-dollar projects, and drank wines I never earned enough to buy in my lifetime. I didn't understand. All I could do was quietly hold my tea on the side. A pretty woman in high heels stood up, covering her mouth as she laughed and walked away, maybe accidentally. The next second, a hand silently pushed me to the ground. My hearing aid hanging on my ear fell off with the external force, plunging my world into silence. Strange fear enveloped me. Pale-faced, I groped around on the floor without any dignity. Evan lowered his head and asked, "What's wrong?" In the dim light of the booth, his face alternated between light and shadow. I could only see his lips moving, but soon darkness swallowed them again. Finally, he noticed my problem. Actually, everyone there realized something was wrong with me. They pointed to their ears in front of Evan. As luck would have it, a beam of light swept past. I could clearly read his lips. "Are you crazy? You found yourself a deaf girl." At that moment, an indescribable sense of inferiority overwhelmed me like a flood. That was the first time I so clearly realized the distance between Evan and me. Every second with him, hurtful words never stopped. "Are you really deaf? Can a deaf person even write songs?" Fake. Just leaning on Evan. A woman should be realistic, knowing what's hers and what's not. Without Evan, you're nothing, Tina. Doubts surrounded me like a whirlpool. I thought about breaking up. Maybe my thoughts were too obvious. Before I could say anything, Evan, usually composed, had tears in his eyes. He hugged me tightly in the back seat, kissing my earlobe, repeatedly saying sorry. "Tina, don't make a fuss, okay? Let's not break up. To me, you're perfect. You don't have any flaws." Since then, Evan never took me to any of his gatherings. Maybe it was to comfort me or redeem his actions. But how could a young, infatuated girl resist such a burning passion? Perhaps it was youthful fervor. Perhaps I just didn't care about our status difference. I naively believed our love could overcome all obstacles. Life seemed to get better and better. Finally, through my efforts, I got an invitation for a somewhat well-known music show. Excited to tell Evan the good news, I overheard his conversation with a friend. "Evan, there's no need to go to such lengths with Tina just to defy your mom. Auntie is already furious. You'll eventually marry Vivian. Don't get too involved. Take a brother's advice. Break up with that deaf girl sooner." The silence lasted a long time, long enough that I thought Evan wouldn't speak, that it was just my imagination when I heard his casual voice through the door. Low and indifferent, as always. "Tina's pretty obedient. It's just dating, not marriage." Thinking back now, what Evan lacked was never a lifelong partner. He just needed a compliant and entertaining lover. I stared at my expressionless face in the mirror. Somewhere along the line, the liveliness had drained from me. Each day, I looked like a walking corpse. I slowly applied lipstick. Just as I walked up to the door, the show's stage manager, panting, stopped me. He looked troubled. "Tina, I'm really sorry. We may not be able to let you on stage." I froze for a moment. The manager looked pretty young and felt bad about informing me of the last-minute change. He cautiously reminded me, "Tina, some things aren't decided by the show's crew. You really don't need to offend someone important." He wanted to say more, but two familiar figures walked in, arm in arm. The previously scattered crowd swarmed like a beehive as the two entered. I followed the commotion with my eyes. The man was tall with long legs. His indifferent but somewhat passionate eyes casually glanced over, making him look exceptionally handsome. He made no effort to avoid looking me directly in the eye. My gaze moved from his cold face to the fair arm wrapped around his. The pretty woman next to him smiled sweetly. She leaned against Evan and, seeing me, tightened her grip on his arm in front of me. In that moment, everything clicked into place. Evan knew better than anyone how much I loved this music show. He also knew it was my lifelong dream to bring my music to a real stage. I had practiced every day to overcome my fears and stood out among hundreds of applicants. My room was filled with crumpled sheet music scattered in the trash and corners. I woke up many nights just wanting to perfect my performance. Yet with just one light remark from him, I was easily replaced. At this moment, an unbridgeable chasm separated us. He walked towards me step by step. He smirked, but his voice cut through me like a bone-chilling sword. "I told you, Tina," he said. "Things you don't want, plenty of others do." Evan knew exactly how to crush me. There's nothing more merciless than shattering someone's dreams. Years of restraint burst uncontrollably at this moment. To everyone's shock, I slapped Evan hard across the face. I used to treasure this man, viewing him as a light in my life. But now, my heart was dead. I looked at him calmly as his eyes filled with disbelief. "So you can just trample on other people's efforts? Evan, you disgust me." Turning to leave, Vivian's concerned, soft voice constantly drilled into my ears. I could feel Evan's hawk-like gaze locking onto my back through the crowd. When had the golden boy ever been treated like this? Every inch of skin on my back felt like it was on fire. I walked faster, not daring to look back. By the time I reached outside the hall, it had already started raining heavily. The dark night had swallowed the usual brightness. My phone buzzed again. Dad, slurring his words from drunkenness, still harshly scolded me. "Little deaf girl, tell me, why would Evan marry someone else? You had a rich man, and you let him go. Tell me, can you do anything right? Can I do anything right?" I stared blankly ahead, eyes devoid of light, taking deep breaths to hold back my tears. The voice on the phone rambled on. "Your mom left because of you. Evan doesn't want you either, and you're still a cripple. How could I have birthed such a jinx?" Hearing this, I couldn't help but pull a bitter smile. "Dad, if it wasn't for the slap you gave me back then, do you think I'd be deaf?" With that, I decisively hung up. The phone kept ringing, but I didn't answer. I wiped my face with my forearm. No one can stand seeing their hard work instantly taken away, but I was too insignificant. The only thing I could do now was start over. Evan would definitely target me even more in the future. I couldn't let him affect my mood every time. After thinking it over, I contacted a studio that had extended multiple invitations, but I had always turned down. We chatted briefly, and they said they were still willing to buy the rights to a few of my unreleased sheet music for a high price. If I agreed, we could sign the contract immediately. I was a bit apprehensive. Back then, I turned them down repeatedly because of their eagerness. After all, I wasn't a renowned musician. Why would a studio pay a high price for an average person's sheet music rights? But when I finally asked, they replied with just 2 sentences. "Everyone has a chance to shine. Besides, you're a diamond in the rough." Those words felt oddly familiar. We scheduled the contract signing for Saturday. We chose a private cafe as the meeting place. Arriving there, the large cafe was empty. The owner made me a cup of my favorite Americano. I sipped the coffee and took out my phone. The music show where Vivian replaced me had aired last night. I guessed Evan pulled some strings to take advantage of the online buzz, urging the production team to expedite it. Vivian took the chance to debut her new song Blossom on the show. While singing, she gazed tenderly at Evan, seated in the audience. The producer, perceptive, quickly focused the camera on Evan's extraordinary face. At the end, they used the final lyrics to openly confess to Evan, "You are a beam of light. Knowing you, I fear I will fade away silently." When the song ended, the production team, aiming for more buzz, used the shot of them together as the cover image for the show. The online discussion exploded. Just half an hour into the broadcast, various entries about Vivian started flooding the trending topics. Vivian the genius, Vivian and Evan, Vivian's new song Bloom. I was the only one whose face went pale upon hearing the song. I wrote it 2 years ago. Every word in the lyrics said my indescribable love for Evan. I'm not the type good at expressing myself. Only in songs could I reveal these feelings so openly. I had planned to give this song to Evan as a birthday present, but he was busy with family affairs then, and by the time we met again, it had been a month. In the end, I didn't get to give him the song. Instead, it got tossed into the deepest part of my drawer. Evan always said I was awkward, reluctant to express my love out loud. Later, I thought if I could one day take my music to the stage, I would bring this song out again and give it to him in front of everyone. So, Evan didn't just steal my song, he gave it to Vivian. He used my love as a sacrifice to fuel his relationship with Vivian. At the end of the show, when the host asked Fiona about the inspiration behind the song, she smiled shyly and carefully glanced toward Evan, who remained silent in the distance. Did that even need to be asked? Among the guests' cheers, the chat exploded with comments. Vivian definitely wrote her love for Evan into the lyrics. Where did our Vivian get her genius from? And what's this Tina even supposed to be? Marketing herself as deaf all day long. Who knows if that's true or not? People without skills like to seek attention in such ways. The vicious comments didn't stop. I stared at them unblinkingly, dazed, when a clearly defined hand unhesitatingly snatched my phone away. He then flipped it over and set it aside. I looked up. Unlike Evan's reserved handsomeness, the man before me was bold in temperament, with slightly raised brows, long eyes, and a distinctly alluring mole under one of them. It was David, the rising new movie star of the year. Seeing my red-rimmed eyes, a hint of displeasure flashed across his face. Years without seeing you, how did our little genius end up like this? His words made me slightly dazed. David and I had known each other since our school days, once planning to form our own band. Later, my ears had an accident, and he went abroad due to family issues. The next time I saw him was on a TV screen. Seeing me still silent, he sighed and sat across from me. You're even harder to reach than those famous directors. Oil and water don't get through. It's harder to see you than to reach for the stars. Actually, David had contacted me under his own name, wanting to shoot a music video together. But at the time, I just had another argument with Evan. I was hitting walls everywhere when a girl introduced me to a film director during one of our shared auditions. We both passed the theme song audition. I was happy until the director blatantly placed his hand on my leg. He said, "The final selection depends on our performance." Upon hearing this, the girl and I exchanged glances. My face turned pale. He tried to kiss me, but I screamed and pushed him off the chair. When I came to, my cheeks were already stinging, and stars danced before my eyes as he slapped me. The overweight middle-aged man glared at me viciously. A deaf girl wanting to sing and compose? The only useful thing about you is your face. I'm choosing you for your looks. He passionately kissed the other girl in front of me. Exhausted, I walked out of the hall. A tall figure with arms crossed was leaning against the wall, phone in hand. Seeing me, he immediately hung up and approached. It seemed like he always found me precisely. He appeared to want to give me something from his pocket. But noticing my injured lip, Evan withdrew his hand, his entire face turning cold, dark as hell itself. He said nothing. I tried to force out a smile and tell Evan I was okay, but he didn't even look my way. He took me home. Then he sat silently in front of the dim couch all night. In the morning, I woke to pieces of shattered glass and scattered cigarette butts under the coffee table. Gripping my wrist tightly, his voice hoarse and indifferent, he said, "Tina, trust me. I can pave every way for you except in music. Promise me, no more music." Evan's expression remained as aloof as always, but his voice carried an evident tremble in my ears. We fought fiercely that time. He wanted me to give up all the opportunities I worked so hard for, to give up my lifelong dream, because to him, they were nothing. In a moment of desperation, I couldn't help but cry out, "Evan, you don't understand me at all. I don't understand you." He was stunned for a moment, then laughed bitterly. "Tina, doing it on your own. Do you really think you can make it? Do you know what else you'll face? With your defect, what right do you have to compete with them? If it weren't for the tracking app one put on your phone, you wouldn't even know all the disgusting things you've encountered like yesterday. You think too much of yourself." Evan stormed out. His harsh words left me stunned for a long time. I wanted to say, I worked so hard not just because I love music, but because I selfishly wanted to be someone who could stand shoulder to shoulder with you. I didn't want every accomplishment to be overshadowed by Evan's name. Looking back, maybe that moment planted an irreparable rift between us. Afterward, we reconciled, but it felt like we'd made some strange pact. Every audition and invitation went through his vetting, and he promised not to meddle in my musical pursuits. But an unbalanced scale is doomed to sway. My brows furrowed in contemplation. As I pondered, David passed me a contract. "Work with me, Tina. I can help you reclaim that song from Vivian." I snapped out of my reverie, but I never showed that song to anyone. I assumed David was joking. "How did you know that song was mine?" I asked as I opened the contract. David always spoke with a touch of nonchalance. People online called him the most unconventional best actor in recent years, but he had been like that since our school days. Unlike me, he never tried to change. His favorite saying was, "Flaws aren't necessarily flaws. I just live differently from what people expect." I believe we are both unpolished gems. Such straightforward trust came out of his mouth so easily. "Tina, you know, everyone who writes songs has their little habits. Some like to add beats at the transitions, some like to add hooks at the end, just like handwriting. I know you too well. That song, both the melody and lyrics, is totally your style. Tina, You're the most talented person in music I've ever met. I don't want you to be restrained by anyone. You once said your biggest dream was to bring your music to the stage. Now I've achieved my own dream. What about you? I think you should achieve yours too. Encouraged by David, I found the backup of the score of Bloom in my computer, but the handwritten draft was lost. David just said it didn't matter. He asked me to take out all the songs I wrote in the past 2 years. He then introduced me to audition for a new music competition show. I wanted to say something, but he cut me off. I didn't say anything to the director. I just gave you a chance to audition. Whether you get through or not, that's up to you. Of course, I trust your talent. As he spoke, David's deep eyes were fixed on me. The way he looked at me only boosted my confidence. I sincerely thanked him. While waiting for the audition result, my heart was in my throat. When I finally heard my name announced on the big screen, I couldn't help but stand up. When I stepped out of the audition room, the air felt fresher than ever. I took a deep breath and bumped into someone. Vivian took off her sunglasses, looked me up and down. Her lips curled into a lazy smile. Do you really need to audition for a no-name little show like this? Our Evan just shows up, and the director comes running, begging on his knees for me to join. I'm still deciding whether to accept. I just looked at her indifferently, not showing any reaction. When she couldn't provoke me, Vivian lost interest. She put her sunglasses back on. Looks like I need to talk to the director about the kind of people joining the show with me. This woman was the epitome of arrogance. But I wasn't angry. I didn't want to be. I just shook my head and said, I also don't want to be on a show with someone who plagiarizes. A person with no real talent, only covering their incompetence with plagiarism, has lost all competitiveness. Something I said must have hit a nerve. Vivian immediately turned around. Her lips moved as she pointed at me and cursed, Tina, stop slandering me. You're a deaf person who writes and composes music. Who'd believe that? Disabled people should know their place. You'll never get your broken music on stage. You're not worthy. I let her rant. For the first time, I was grateful for my hearing aid. I took it off, ignored the frantic Vivian, and left without looking back. As I turned the corner, I saw someone standing there. David was leaning against the wall, nodding lightly with his headphones on, lost in his own world. When a shadow disrupted the light, he slowly opened his eyes. His amber pupils caught hold of me in the sunlight. You got through. It wasn't a question, but a statement. I nodded. He LED'd me out, his broad back like a mountain shielding me. We reached a dark brown Maserati. David opened the passenger door, a faint smile on his lips. I didn't get in. He turned on the Bluetooth speaker, and a familiar soothing melody with soft humming and guitar accompaniment flowed into my ears. It was actually the little love song I sang at the school art festival in my senior year. David was my accompanist, and I was the singer. The parking lot was silent. David's voice was clear, as bold and candid as ever. Tina, I fell in love with your music at first sight. Music is an adjective. After David confessed, we didn't meet again until the music show started filming. That's when I found out David was one of the judges. He always called me a musical genius, but to me, it seemed like he was the one who deserved everyone's admiration. Back then, our situations were similar, but while I just sighed and lamented, he shined like a bright sun over everyone. David excelled at everything he learned. Acting, singing, it seemed there was nothing he couldn't do. He often said, life is meant to be lived for yourself. If you want it, there's nothing you can't achieve. From afar, he nodded and smiled at me, his smile gentle and lingering. I turned my head uncomfortably. Besides me, there were several other original artists on the show. Vivian was the last to arrive, softly apologizing to everyone. I'm sorry, my boyfriend is clingy. It took some time. Her gaze fell deliberately on me. I had a feeling she was planning something. I guess the director didn't cut me from the lineup and instead paired me with Vivian because they probably wanted to generate some buzz online. In the first episode, to add some flair, they asked us to create an impromptu song with guitar accompaniment about the person we love the most. Every word I wrote for this was a dig at the song Bloom that Vivian sang recently. But looking at Vivian, it was clear she could only sing that song, which wasn't even hers. The show gave us just 20 minutes to prepare. A tight deadline really shows a singer's professionalism. I thought about it and decided to adapt a love song I wrote back in high school. Then I started tuning my guitar. When the 20 minutes were up, I saw Vivian reluctantly put down her pen. When she performed, though, the judges' expressions gradually shifted from anticipation to confusion and disappointment. One of the judges commented diplomatically, maybe inspiration strikes at certain moments. Compared to Vivian's Bloom, this one falls a bit short. But because Vivian has Evan backing her, and despite the fact that her performance was terrible, nobody dared to say it outright. They had to keep praising her to ensure she stayed in the competition. After all, the show's script demanded that Vivian be the ultimate champion. When the episode airs, people will just be watching for entertainment anyway. How many viewers will actually understand the intricacies of music? If the judges flatter Vivian, the viewers will blindly follow. And Vivian actually believed in the empty praise, until David, who hadn't commented at all, was repeatedly called upon by the host. Everyone's eyes were on him because David's expertise is widely recognized in both music and entertainment industries. His remarks are like a stabilizing force, steering public opinion precisely. He raised an eyebrow, his eyes narrowing slightly, and a faint smirk appeared at the corner of his lips. What was that? The room fell silent instantly. Vivian's arrogant smile froze on her face. David acted as if he hadn't just said that. He rested his chin on his hand, staring in my direction. The camera focused on me. With a familiar tune and my lyrical skills, once I started singing, the whole audience went wild. I had barely gotten halfway through when I was abruptly stopped. The judges' faces changed. Tina, improvising doesn't mean plagiarizing someone else's work. Murmurs began to spread through the audience. Plagiarism. Has Tina lost her mind? She's actually plagiarizing. I knew it. How could a deaf person participate in a music show? She should be out after the first episode. I can't believe I had hope for her. You just can't trust someone with a disability to compose and sing. I bet all her previous songs were plagiarized too. Vivian looked smug, clearly enjoying my public downfall. At that moment, David, who hadn't said anything, finally reacted. He pursed his lips, tilted his head, and pulled out the sheet music for Bloom. A song is like a child. It resonates only with its creator. So, contestant number 1, he glanced at Vivian. What was your initial inspiration for creating Bloom? Can you explain the meaning of every line in the lyrics? And what does the title represent? Caught off guard, Vivian couldn't answer a single question. She finally stammered out with a dark expression. That's not relevant to today's improvisation. And anyway, I've already got the pass card. David then looked at me. How is it not relevant? Improvisation still depends on the creator's own skill set. An artist's style can vary, but their work will always carry their imprint. In your song, I barely see any of your touch. Even in today's improvisation, I only see a poor attempt to mimic Bloom. However, David's smile turned chilling. Ironically, I see Tina's influence in Bloom. I instantly understood David's point. Seeing him look at me again, I smiled and confidently explained the inspiration behind my impromptu song. In the end, I flat out said, I don't know if anyone else thinks the title Bloom doesn't match the lyrics. Because the original title wasn't Bloom, it was Dream. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the director frantically signaling to shut off the cameras. I chuckled and raised my voice. The lyrics aren't about passionate love, but about the humility and longing behind it. She longs to be on equal footing with her beloved, walking side by side into the future. I turned to see Vivian shaking uncontrollably. I couldn't help but laugh softly. Vivian, stolen things are always stolen. If you have the guts, steal my brain too. Otherwise, I can write hundreds of songs better than Dream. And you'll never have another one. At that point, the show was urgently paused. Reality TV can be edited, so Vivian demanded that the director cut this part out and warned everyone present not to speak of it. But people have their own mouths. Someone brave must have recorded the scene with their phone and posted it online. Other netizens also jumped in to confirm that the incident was real. For people in the music industry, plagiarism is disgraceful enough to get someone entirely kicked out of the circle. The public followed suit, and in an instant, the tide turned in my favor. On top of that, David, the acclaimed actor, quickly posted on Facebook, condemning plagiarism and openly siding with me. Vivian ended up getting utterly shamed. Her previous songs were also dug up and found to have traces of plagiarism. A small-time singer came forward holding her ID, tearfully posting that Vivian had stolen her song, produced it into an album, and threatened to ruin her life if she spoke up. This sparked a wave of public outrage. People swarmed to Vivian's account to curse at her, sent official complaints to take her songs down, and some even found her license plate number. People were throwing rotten eggs at her car. As things escalated, Vivian became a social pariah, forced to feign death online. I seized the momentum and shared my unreleased songs and compositions. On David's advice, I recorded an original version of Dream. Unlike Vivian's overly dramatic rendition, I started with a low pitch and split the climax into 2 parts, like a butterfly breaking out of its cocoon, telling a story of a love that ends in tragedy but defies fate. This was the song's true essence. Some attentive listeners even found Evan's name hidden in Dream. Comments poured in. We were wrong. I think Tina and Evan are a better match. Tina must have loved Evan deeply, to the point of not daring to say it. Tina probably felt she wasn't good enough for Evan. This love destined for a bad ending breaks my heart. Everyone realized my love for Evan, and how I had carefully hidden his name in every corner of the lyrics. But he shattered it himself and handed it over to someone else. 2 days later, Evan held a press conference. He publicly announced his engagement to Vivian. He must have thought this would quell the negative publicity surrounding Vivian. After all, her family's business had plummeted due to the plagiarism scandal. As her fiancé, he couldn't stay inactive. Vivian also posted on Facebook, saying she would leave the music industry to make amends, indirectly admitting she had plagiarized my song. Because of this, my status saw a dramatic reversal. Offers poured in non-stop. The music show that had recently broken the contract also reached out to apologize, saying they lost a talent. They asked if I was willing to rejoin their second season and continue composing for them. 3 months later, I wore a pink and white mermaid dress, holding David's arm, stepping onto the stage I was so proud of. This time, everyone finally remembered Tina. I held up the Best Song Award trophy, tears welling up in my eyes. Everyone was clapping for me. All the acceptance speech I had prepared disappeared under the spotlight. David waited quietly by my side, carefully adjusting the microphone for me, with a gentle look in his eyes. No one would speak ill of me anymore. After a while, encouraged by David's gaze, I finally mustered the courage to speak. This journey had its tears, laughter, pain, and moments of moving emotions, but I have never regretted it. Music is my lifelong pursuit, and there is no other. I bowed. When I looked up, I saw a pair of restrained eyes. He was sitting in the audience, his eyes red, staring at me motionlessly. After the award ceremony ended, Evan blocked me at the door of the banquet. He looked quite disheveled, with a cut on his lip, stubble on his usually well-groomed chin, and fatigue in his eyes. I could faintly see bruises on his neck. I had come across news about him. It said he left Vivian alone at the engagement party, making a huge joke out of both families. But I didn't pay much attention. When he saw me, the once arrogant prince's eyes turned red. He took a step forward, hesitated, and carefully grabbed my wrist. In a hoarse voice, Evan said, "I spent 3 months realizing how much I love you. I didn't know that song was for." He paused, with a self-righteous determination in his eyes. "I've told my family clearly, I won't marry Vivian. I'll only help her this one time. I'll work hard to convince them to accept you." Seeing my silence, a flash of panic crossed his eyes, but he forced himself to stay calm and said, "Will you get back with me, Tina?" I looked at him expressionlessly. Evan finally panicked. He awkwardly patted his clothes, then his eyes lit up as he took out a silver ring from his pocket, trying to put it on my ring finger. "Tina, I know you still love me. You always wanted to marry me. Let's get married now. Right now." What he said so carelessly were words I had longed to hear. He never understood what I truly wanted. "Evan, the world doesn't revolve around you." I suddenly shook off his hand. The ring flew out of his hand, landed on the ground, rolled a bit, and stopped on the side. He looked shocked, staring blankly at the ring in the corner. I turned to leave. Evan grabbed my arm and yanked me back. He hugged me tightly and whispered in my ear, Tina, sometimes I really don't understand you. You're both fragile and stubborn, leaving me clueless about what to do. You refuse to accept any help from me. Even when you're in trouble, you try to figure it out yourself. You make me feel like you don't love me at all. It seems like you love your music more than me." He looked like he was about to be moved by his own words. I thought I didn't necessarily need him, but I still gradually fell for him, even though I knew I would eventually have to leave him. As a member of the Liu family, I didn't have the right to choose my marriage. I had to marry into the Song family. Yet, I couldn't bear to let him go. In that moment, I realized I loved him more than I had thought. But at this moment, looking at his self-pitying face, I just found him ridiculously laughable. "Evan, aren't you tired of acting?" He was stunned. I took a step back, subtly widening the distance between us, drawing a clear line between us. "Evan, I don't love you anymore. Don't bother me again." He tried to step forward again. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a tall figure rushing out quickly. With one punch, Evan was knocked to the ground. David stood protectively in front of me, hiding his usual carefree demeanor. His back heaved slightly in anxiety as he looked down at Evan struggling to get up but failing. Fighting in public is unsightly. I poked David's waist with my finger. His back stiffened for a moment but then relaxed quickly. "Let's go," I whispered. David obediently turned around. After a few steps, we heard a low roar from behind. "Tina, if you don't love me, then tell me, what's the deal with that song? You used to be so obedient, but those stupid songs have turned you into this." He seemed desperate to find a truth that only belonged to him from me. I paused and turned slightly. The moon was full tonight, scattering fine light over Evan's head. For the first time, I saw a fragility in Evan. He stared at me stubbornly, as if he were just waiting for my answer. The man's face overlapped with the boy who once saved me at the alley entrance. For the first time since our separation, I seriously spoke to him. "Evan, you never thought about being with me forever. You never knew how to respect me." I curled my lips into a mocking smile. "Just like now, you never understand my likes and feelings. This isn't love, it's possessiveness. A pampered prince like you would never easily offer someone your true heart." Evan never understood my insecurities, nor did he care to. By now, the only thing he's struggling with is why I stopped loving him. How could I stop loving him? Plus, I wasn't so obedient because I wanted to be. I was obedient because I was scared, and at that time, I loved you a lot. But now, you just disgust me. I added, a lot. I turned and walked forward. "This ring, I wanted to give it to you 3 years ago." Evan suddenly shouted. He picked up the ring from the ground, holding it up. As he talked, his voice choked up. But back then, I wasn't sure. I couldn't hear clearly after that. I didn't stop walking. David matched my pace. He naturally started discussing the soundtrack for the latest movie he was working on. By the way, David looked at me. There's a soccer match at the stadium soon. Want to go? I paused. In David's eyes, I seemed like a normal person. He never paid extra attention to me. Whatever he could enjoy, I could too. I nodded at him. He seemed relieved, slowed his pace, and contentedly walked beside me. Moonlight broke through the clouds. This time, I would follow my path without hesitation. Afterward, I poured all my focus into my career. In recent years, I won multiple awards in music. This also sparked jealousy from others. Overnight, I received thousands of comments, claiming my success was solely due to the help of the actor David. Negative reviews fueled public opinion. I read one comment. First it was Evan, now it's David. Has Tina ever achieved anything on her own? Before I could react, a user named When Will David Achieve His Dreams clapped back. Every negative comment about me was persistently rebutted by this person. I stayed up all night reading those comments. The next morning, David called, saying he wanted to help explain things on Facebook. I replied offhandedly, wouldn't that just confirm their claims even more? David went silent. I ended up comforting him. I know you're worried about me, but I have a plan. He didn't hang up but, after a while, sighed, Tina, you've really changed a lot. I paused, then chuckled, because I've got a lot of people around me who encourage me now. Negativity and encouragement impact a person very differently. I immediately picked up a pen and wrote a new song. I didn't use professional recording equipment. With just earphones and guitar accompaniment, I softly sang a story about a girl with a hearing impairment chasing her dreams and succeeding on her own. The song went viral the same day. The topic "Why can't women make it on their own?" trended at number 1. Why can't women make it on their own? If you have talent and ability, why not show it? I support Tina. When she was with Evan, she never used her music to gain attention. She respects music more than anyone. You guys are just jealous of her success. This song nearly brought me to tears. Tina must be telling her own story. Fans are feeling nostalgic. My old song Dream is trending again. Evan's name is coming up a lot, along with Vivian's current miserable state. I heard after Evan ditched her at the altar, she went nuts, called the press, and kept attempting suicide to force Evan to marry her. She calmed down for a few days after Evan slapped her in public. Now, she's threatening to jump off a building. But Evan refuses to give in, even saying if they push him too hard, he'll just become a monk and no one will be able to control him. Evan's dad nearly beat him to death with a cane in front of reporters. Evan's still recovering in the hospital. This whole drama is so wild, I can't tell if it's real or just a joke. I scroll further down. David's username, When Can David Chase His Dreams, pops up again. This guy left like a dozen comments in a row. Isn't Evan supposed to be a monk? Why bring him up? I think David and Tina make a better pair. Stop dwelling on the past, focus on the present. David looks at Tina in a weird way. I glance at the man lying on the sofa with a strange smile on his face and casually say, you forgot to switch accounts. David's face changes instantly. He sits up quickly. No way. I thought I switched. When he meets my scrutinizing gaze, he scratches his head awkwardly and changes the subject. Your dad hasn't bothered you again, has he? This piques my interest, and I don't expose him. Instead, I curiously ask, what did you do? Ever since I became famous, my dad keeps showing up asking for money. If I don't give him any, he causes a scene at my company's entrance. I've called the cops countless times, but they can't do anything since it's a family matter. David rubs his nose, his attractive almond eyes narrowing with a hint of ruthlessness. Of course, I had a nice chat with him. I'm skeptical, but David's innocent smile makes it hard to doubt him. No one knows this, but the night Tina's dad made a scene, the usually gentle David, eyes filled with malice, held a knife to his throat. I wouldn't mind killing someone for Tina, but fortunately, it didn't come to that.